The council chamber stretched above Ambassador Taman Park like a cathedral made of light and metal. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated sections, their forms ranging from the jellyfish-like aquarians to the crystalline lithoids. Taman stood at the center platform, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the edges of the speaking podium. Behind him, holographic displays showed the horror unfolding on New Horizon. Bodies lined the streets of the colony's capital city. Medical workers in containment suits moved between them, checking for signs of life. The numbers scrolled across the bottom of the screen. 847,000 dead in 3 weeks. The crimson fade was spreading faster than anyone could have predicted. Honorable Council members, Taman began, his voice echoing through the chamber. Humanity asks for your help. This plague targets only human DNA. We have shared our technology with you for 200 years. We have opened our worlds to trade and friendship. Now we need your medical expertise, your research facilities, your compassion. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Taman noticed the Zentari delegation whispering among themselves. Councillor Vexithara, a tall being covered in blue scales, rose from his seat. His voice carried the weight of authority when he spoke. Ambassador Park, we sympathize with your plight. However, we must consider the safety of all galactic citizens. This disease, while currently affecting only humans, could mutate. We propose an immediate quarantine of all human-controlled space until we better understand this threat. Taman felt his heart sink. Counselor, our scientists have proven that the Crimson Fade cannot affect non-human biology. The disease is highly specific to human genetic markers. There is no risk to other species. Hyejin Lee, Earth's chief scientist, stepped forward. She had traveled to the council chambers specifically for this hearing. Her face showed the exhaustion of someone who had not slept in days. She activated her own data display, showing complex molecular structures and genetic sequences. The pathogen is engineered, Hyejin explained, her voice clear despite her fatigue. This is not a natural plague. Someone created this disease specifically to attack humanity. The targeting is too precise to be accidental. We need help finding who did this and why. We need resources to develop a cure. What we do not need is isolation. Vexithara's expression remained unchanged. Engineered or natural, the risk remains. We cannot gamble with trillions of lives across the galaxy. I call for an immediate vote on the quarantine protocol. The chamber erupted in discussion. Taman watched as delegations huddled together, debating. He saw the Talaxian representative, Mira Kwan, shaking her head in disagreement with her senior counselors. The Nexarian military attaché Suji Bai sat silent, her face unreadable. The vote took only minutes to organize. One by one, the species cast their decisions on the massive display board. Green lights meant support for humanity. Red lights meant support for quarantine. Taman watched the board fill with red. His chest tightened with each new light that appeared. 47 votes cast, 44 red, 3 green. The Talaxians, the Banari, and the small delegation from Proxima Colony had stood with humanity. Everyone else had chosen fear over friendship. The council speaker, an ancient being whose species name humanity had never learned to pronounce, struck the ceremonial chime. The quarantine protocol is enacted. All FTL gates connecting to human space will be deactivated within 6 hours. All trade agreements are suspended. All cultural exchanges are terminated. This quarantine will remain in effect until the council determines the threat has passed. Taman felt numb. 200 years of partnership gone in minutes. He thought of the human children who had grown up believing they were part of something larger, something beautiful. He thought of the mixed families, human and alien, who would now be separated. He thought of the millions dying on New Horizon, who would die without the help they desperately needed. May I make a final statement? Taman asked. The speaker nodded. You have 3 minutes, Ambassador. Taman looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many counselors as he could. Some looked away. Others met his gaze with what might have been shame or might have been indifference. We came to you in friendship, Taman said quietly. The chamber's acoustics carried his words to every corner. When humanity first developed faster-than-light travel, we reached out with open hands. We shared our music, our stories, our innovations. We believed in the dream of a united galaxy, where species helped each other, where no one faced the darkness alone. He paused, letting his words sink in. We shared our medical technology when the lithoid plague threatened to crystallize an entire species. We provided fusion reactor designs to the Outer Rim colonies when they faced energy collapse. We sent teachers, artists, engineers, and diplomats to dozens of worlds. We did these things not for profit, but because we believed in community. Hijin stood beside him now, her hand on his shoulder in support. Today you have shown us what that community truly means, Taemin continued. When the crisis is yours, we help. When the crisis is ours, you run. You hide behind protocols and fear. You abandon us when we need you most. Vexathara started to speak, but Taemin raised his hand. I am not finished. You have 2 minutes left to hear what humanity has to say, Counselor. You can spare that much, surely. The Zentari counselor settled back into his seat, his face dark with anger. We will cure this plague ourselves, Taemin said. We will save our people without your help. And when we do, we will remember this day. We will remember who stood with us and who turned away. Every human alive will know that when we cried out for help, the Galactic Council chose silence. He turned to leave, then stopped. One last thing. There are 17 human colonies scattered across this region of space. There are billions of humans living, working, and dying while you debate protocols. Before you seal us away, know this: humanity will survive. We always have. But whether we ever trust you again, whether we ever return to these chambers, whether we ever again offer our friendship to the galaxy, the choice died today with your vote. The chamber remained silent as Taemin and Hyejin walked toward the exit. Behind them, the great display showed the countdown to gate deactivation. 5 hours, 42 minutes. Miraquan caught up with them in the corridor outside. The young Talaxian diplomat had tears in her large eyes. Ambassador Park, please know that not all of us agreed with this decision. We tried to argue for cooperation, for shared research, for basic compassion. Taemin placed a hand on her shoulder. I know, Counselor Quan, your vote will be remembered. When humans tell their children about this day, they will know that 3 species chose courage over cowardice. 6 hours later, the last FTL gate winked out of existence. The communication relays went dark. 17 human worlds home to 4 billion people vanished from the galactic network. In the silence that followed, some counselors celebrated a crisis averted. Others felt a weight settle on their hearts that would never quite lift. On New Horizon, the dying continued. On Earth, scientists worked frantically to develop a cure without galactic assistance. And in the space between worlds, humanity began to change in ways the Galactic Council could never have predicted. They had wanted isolation. They would get it. But isolation, as they would learn, cuts both ways. 150 years had passed since the gates closed. The Galactic Council still met in the same grand chamber, still debated trade agreements and border disputes, still maintained the appearance of unity. But something fundamental had changed. Counselor Suji Bei noticed it every time she entered the building. The artwork in the corridors was derivative. The same themes, the same styles repeated endlessly. The music playing in the common areas sounded hollow, like copies of copies. Even the debates themselves had grown stale. The same arguments, the same solutions, the same tired rhetoric. Suji had been a junior military attaché during the quarantine. Now she served as the Nexarian representative to the council, and she watched the slow decline with growing concern. Her species had voted for the quarantine. She had been young then, too junior to influence the decision. But she remembered the reasoning: protect the many, sacrifice the few. The Zentari Empire had suffered the most dramatic collapse. Their economy, once the strongest in the galaxy, had crumbled over the past 50 years. The technology that powered their civilization was breaking down, and their engineers could not fix it. They had relied heavily on human-designed artificial intelligence systems, but they had never truly understood how those systems worked. Now, with the humans gone and the documentation incomplete, critical infrastructure was failing. Daeho Choi worked in the Zentari Imperial Archives. His great-grandmother had been human, one of the few who had married outside her species before the quarantine. He had inherited her dark hair and her curiosity. While cataloging old military records, he found something that made his blood run cold. The files were labeled Operation Crimson Dawn, and they were classified at the highest level. Daeho should not have had access to them, but the security systems had degraded along with everything else. He read the documents 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. The Crimson Fade had been created in a Zentari bioweapons laboratory. It was designed to target human DNA specifically. The plan had been simple: release the plague on a remote human colony, propose quarantine for galactic safety, then seize human technology and colonies while they were isolated and struggling. The Centauri had intended to reverse engineer everything humanity had built, then lift the quarantine after claiming they had stabilized the threat. But something had gone wrong. The humans had been more resilient than predicted. They had not collapsed into chaos, and the Centauri had never managed to crack the deeper secrets of human technology. Now they were paying the price for their treachery. Deho copied the files and spent 3 sleepless nights deciding what to do. His loyalty was to truth, not to an empire built on lies. He uploaded the documents to the Galactic Network using an anonymous relay. Within hours, the information spread across 100 worlds. The reaction was explosive. Investigative journalists began digging into their own government's roles in the quarantine. Species after species uncovered evidence of conspiracy. The Aquarians had seized 3 human ocean worlds, claiming they were abandoned. The Lithoids had stolen human mining patents. The Nexarians had reverse-engineered human weapons designs. The quarantine had not been about safety. It had been about greed. And now, 150 years later, the evidence was undeniable. Mira Kwan was no longer a junior diplomat. She had risen to become one of the most respected voices in the council, known for her integrity and moral clarity. When the revelations broke, she immediately called for an emergency session. The chamber was packed with representatives, journalists, and observers. "We have lived a lie," Mira said, her voice carrying through the space. "Our predecessors did not quarantine humanity to protect the galaxy. They quarantined humanity to rob them. They engineered a plague, murdered millions, and then abandoned an entire species to die alone. And we, their successors, continued that crime through our silence." The chamber erupted in shouting. Some counselors denied the allegations. Others demanded investigations. A few simply sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of the betrayal. Suji stood and waited for quiet. "Counselor Kwan is correct. I have reviewed the evidence from multiple sources. The conspiracy was real and involved multiple governments, including my own. The question now is, what do we do about it?" The debate raged for 3 days. Finally, a resolution passed unanimously. The quarantine would end immediately. All FTL gates to human space would be reactivated. Formal apologies would be issued. Reparations would be negotiated. Humanity would be invited to rejoin the council with full voting rights and guaranteed protections. Hyun Nam, a young diplomat from the Banari Confederacy, was chosen to lead the reconciliation mission. His species had voted against the quarantine and maintained that position for a century and a half. He seemed like the perfect choice to rebuild trust. The gates were reactivated with great ceremony. Communication relays came online. Diplomatic vessels loaded with medical supplies, technology gifts, and formal documents set out for human space. Hyun's ship led the convoy, broadcasting messages of apology and friendship on all frequencies. They received no response. The gates were active, but no ships came through from the human side. The communication relays functioned perfectly, but no one answered. Hyun sent probe after probe through the gates, each one loaded with sensors and peaceful greetings. The probes that returned showed something unexpected. Human colonies were thriving. Cities had expanded dramatically. Orbital stations surrounded every inhabited world. The population had more than doubled. Energy signatures suggested technology far beyond what the Council possessed. Humanity was alive. Humanity was prospering, and humanity was ignoring them completely. One probe captured a brief transmission from a world called Terra Nova. The message was simple and cold. "To whom it may concern, we are well. We wish you the same. Please respect our borders." It was signed by Chancellor Minho Sung of the United Human Territories. The silence from humanity triggered panic across the council. If they were thriving, why would they not respond? Were they planning revenge? Had they developed weapons during their isolation? The questions multiplied and fear grew. Suji tried to calm the rising paranoia. Perhaps they simply do not trust us. Can we blame them? We engineered a plague, killed their people, and abandoned them for 150 years. Silence might be the kindest response we could hope for. But paranoia is easier to spread than calm. Trade disputes escalated as species accused each other of preparing for human retaliation. Old alliances fractured. The unity that had held the council together, already weakened by guilt, began to splinter under the weight of fear. Hyun refused to give up. He assembled a small team and approached the council with a desperate plan. He would take a single, unarmed vessel directly to Earth. He would broadcast continuously, begging for an audience. He would wait as long as necessary. The council approved, though many doubted it would work. Hyun's ship, carrying only 5 crew members and no weapons, jumped through the gate to the Sol system. They emerged in orbit around humanity's homeworld and began broadcasting. "This is Ambassador Hyun Nam of the Binari Confederacy. I come unarmed and in peace. We know what was done to you. We know the depth of our betrayal. We do not ask for forgiveness, only for the chance to apologize face to face. Please let us speak." For 3 weeks, the ship orbited in silence. The crew took turns sleeping, maintaining the broadcast, and staring at the blue-green planet below. They detected defense satellites tracking them, but no one fired. They saw ships coming and going from the orbital stations, but none approached. On the 22nd day, a response came. A human voice, calm and professional. "Ambassador Nam, you are cleared to land at Geneva Spaceport. A single shuttle. No weapons. No recording devices beyond personal memory. You will meet with our representatives tomorrow at noon." Hyun felt hope surge through him for the first time in months. "We accept your terms with gratitude. Thank you for this opportunity." As the shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, Hyun looked out at the world below. The cities were larger than the old records showed. The infrastructure was more advanced. Humanity had not just survived their isolation. They had transformed. The question was, would they ever forgive? Or had the Galactic Council destroyed something that could never be rebuilt? The shuttle touched down gently on the landing pad. Through the window, Hyun could see a small reception committee waiting. At their center stood a man in simple formal wear, his expression neutral and unreadable. Chancellor Min-ho Sung had arrived to hear what the galaxy had to say. The meeting room in Geneva was deliberately modest. Plain walls, simple furniture, and windows that looked out over the old city. Chancellor Min-ho Sung sat at one end of a rectangular table, flanked by Dr. Ji-won An and Admiral Soo-hyun Oh. Their expressions were polite but distant, like diplomats meeting with strangers rather than old friends. Hyun Nam sat across from them with his small team. He had prepared a speech, practiced it 100 times during the voyage. Now facing these 3 humans, the words felt inadequate. "Chancellor Sung," Hyun began, "thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I know our people have caused yours immeasurable pain." Min-ho nodded slightly. "You have. Please continue." Hyun opened the data tablet before him. "The Galactic Council has uncovered the full truth about the quarantine. The Crimson Fade was engineered by the Zentari Empire as a bioweapon. Multiple species conspired to use the crisis as an opportunity to seize human technology and territory. What happened was not a mistake or an overreaction. It was a deliberate crime." Dr. Ji-won leaned forward. "We discovered that 20 years into the quarantine. Our intelligence services are quite effective." The statement hung in the air. Hyun felt his prepared speech crumbling. These people already knew. They had known for over a century and had still chosen silence. "Then you understand," Hyun said carefully, "that many current council members were not part of the original conspiracy. We were children when the quarantine began, or not yet born. We have spent years investigating, exposing the truth, and working to make amends." Admiral Soo-hyun spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm but carried an edge. "And we appreciate that effort, Ambassador. Truly. But understanding the past does not obligate us to return to it." Hyun felt his hope beginning to crack. "The Council is prepared to offer full reparations. We will return all seized territory, all stolen patents, all illegally obtained technology. We will provide economic support for reconstruction. We will guarantee humanity a permanent seat on the Council with veto power over any future quarantines or sanctions." Min-ho smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "That is generous. What makes you think we want any of it?" The question caught Hyun off guard. "Chancellor, humanity was once a cornerstone of galactic civilization. Your culture enriched us all. Your innovations drove progress. Your diplomats helped resolve conflicts that might have escalated into wars. The galaxy needs humanity." "No," Dr. Ji-won said quietly. "The galaxy wants humanity. There is a difference. You need implies dependence, mutual support. You want implies desire, which can be withdrawn when convenient." She stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. When the Crimson Fade began killing us, we needed help. We needed research facilities, medical expertise, and compassion. What we wanted was irrelevant, but the galaxy chose its comfort over our survival. Hyun tried again. Doctor, I understand your anger. It is justified, but punishing current generations for the crimes of their ancestors serves no one. Admiral Soo-hyun laughed, a short, bitter sound. Punishment? Ambassador, you misunderstand our position entirely. We are not punishing anyone. We are simply declining to participate in a system that failed us. Minho gestured for them to return to the table. Let me explain our perspective clearly, Ambassador Nam. When the quarantine began, humanity faced two choices: collapse into chaos and die, or adapt and survive. We chose survival. He activated a holographic display showing human space over the past 150 years. Worlds glowed with activity, trade routes crisscrossed between systems, and new colonies appeared in previously unexplored regions. We had no help, so we learned to help ourselves. We had no advanced medical research facilities, so we built our own. We had no alien allies, so we strengthened bonds between human worlds. In that crucible of isolation, we discovered something important. What did you discover? Hyun asked. That we did not need the Galactic Council to thrive, Minho said simply. We needed ourselves. Our own ingenuity, our own determination, our own unity. The lesson was painful but invaluable. Dr. Jiwon brought up medical data. We cured the Crimson Fade in 18 years. We developed treatments for 17 other diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. We extended our average lifespan by 30 years. We did this alone because we had no choice. Admiral Soo-hyun added military information. We built defense systems assuming the galaxy might one day decide quarantine was not enough. We developed ships, weapons, and strategic capabilities that rival anything the Council possesses. We did this alone because trust had to be earned from within. Hyun looked at the data, his heart sinking. You have built an impressive civilization. But isolation has costs, too. Cultural exchange, diverse perspectives, the sharing of ideas across species barriers. These things have value. They do, Minho agreed, which is why we maintain trade relationships with 43 individual species. We welcome cultural exchanges with anyone who approaches us honestly. We share medical knowledge with developing worlds. We just do it on our terms, not as subordinates to a council that betrayed us. So you will trade with us but not join us? Hyun asked. Exactly, Minho said. We hold no grudge against individual species. But we will never again place our fate in the hands of a collective body that can vote away our rights when convenient. Hyun spent 3 days in Geneva, meeting with various human officials. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Polite acknowledgement of the council's apology. Firm refusal to rejoin, offers of limited cooperation on specific issues. But always the door to full partnership remained closed. On his last day, Hyun met privately with Minho. Chancellor, may I speak frankly? Please do. The Galactic Council is fracturing. Without humanity's stabilizing influence, old conflicts are re-emerging. Economic systems are failing. The unity we built over centuries is collapsing. We need you. Minho poured tea for both of them, a human gesture of hospitality.
Ambassador, let me tell you what humanity needed 150 years ago.
We needed medicine for our dying. We needed research assistance. We needed someone to stand beside us and say we matter. We received none of those things. He sipped his tea. Now you come to us and say the galaxy is suffering, that systems are failing, that unity is collapsing, and you expect us to care more about your problems than you cared about ours? We were wrong then, Hyun said desperately. But two wrongs do not make a right. Humanity has always been better than us. More compassionate, more idealistic, more willing to help even those who do not deserve it. That is what made you special. Minho set down his cup carefully. You are asking humanity to be your conscience because you cannot find your own. You are asking us to fix problems you created because fixing them yourselves is too difficult. Do you see the problem with that request? Hyun did see it. He saw it clearly and it made him want to weep. What can I tell the council? They are desperate for hope. Tell them the truth, Minho said. Tell them that humanity wishes them well, that we will trade fairly, respond to genuine emergencies, and maintain cordial relationships. But we will not return. We will not be your safety net, your moral compass, or your crisis management team. He stood, signaling the meeting was over. Tell them that if the Galactic Council needs those things, it must develop them internally. We did, they can too. Hyun returned to his ship with a heavy heart. The journey back to Council space felt longer than the journey out. When he finally stood before the assembled representatives and delivered humanity's answer, the chamber fell into stunned silence. They said no. Vexathara, now elderly but still serving, could not believe it. We offered them everything. Not everything, Sujibe said quietly. We could not offer them back the 150 years they spent alone. We could not resurrect their dead. We could not restore their trust. Miraquan stood, tears streaming down her face. Then we have lost them. We have lost the best part of ourselves. The council tried to continue as normal, but Hyun's report circulated widely, and the knowledge that humanity had rejected them created a psychological wound that would not heal. Species began questioning the value of the council itself. If even humanity, the most forgiving and optimistic species they had known, refused to participate, what did that say about the institution? Within a year, 3 species withdrew their membership. Within 5 years, the council had split into regional blocks. Within a decade, it existed only as a coordinating body for trade disputes, stripped of any real authority. The great dream of galactic unity died not with war or invasion, but with a simple, quiet refusal from the species it had abandoned. 20 years after Hyun Nam's failed mission, the galaxy looked very different. The Galactic Council existed only in name, a bureaucratic shell managing trade agreements and border disputes. Real power had shifted to regional alliances and independent federations. Some species thrived in the new order, others struggled with instability and conflict. Humanity, meanwhile, had expanded to 32 star systems. The United Human Territories had become a major economic and cultural force, but one that operated independently from galactic politics. They traded with dozens of species, hosted cultural exchanges, and provided humanitarian aid during disasters. But they maintained strict boundaries. No political entanglements, no collective security agreements, no subordination to external authority. Yuna Han had succeeded Minho Sung as chancellor 15 years earlier. She was younger than Minho had been, more willing to engage with the outside galaxy, but equally firm on the principle of independence. Under her leadership, humanity had formalized its approach to external relations in a document called the Principles of Sovereign Cooperation. The principles were simple. Humanity would help those who asked honestly. They would trade fairly with anyone willing to do the same. They would defend the innocent when called upon, but only as allies, never as subordinates. And they would never again trust their survival to the decisions of others. Daeho Choi, now an elderly man, had spent decades documenting the quarantine and its aftermath. His historical account, The Cost of Silence, had become required reading in schools across a dozen species. Young people who had not lived through the crisis learned about it from his careful, balanced narrative. Daeho had been invited to speak at what remained of the council headquarters on Centaura Prime. The building itself was a monument to faded glory. Half the section stood empty. The grand chambers, where 47 species had once debated, now hosted trade negotiators from regional blocks. The artwork still hung on the walls, but no one maintained it anymore. A crowd of students from 20 different species gathered in one of the old conference rooms. They were the generation born after the fracture, young people trying to understand how the dream of galactic unity had died. Daeho stood before them, his notes prepared but unnecessary. He had told this story so many times that the words came automatically. The Galactic Council collapsed because it forgot a fundamental truth. Daeho began. Unity built on convenience is not unity at all. It is an alliance of mutual benefit that dissolves the moment sacrifice becomes necessary. He brought up images from the quarantine era, the vote count 44-3, the closing gates, the silent human worlds. The students leaned forward, engaged, despite having seen these images in their history classes. When humanity needed help, the council calculated costs and benefits. The cost of helping, potential risk, economic disruption, political complications. The benefit of helping, maintaining relationships with one species. They chose the economically rational option. A young lithoid student raised a crystalline hand. But humans helped others before the quarantine. They saved my species from the crystallization plague. Why did they help when it was not economically rational for them? Daeho smiled. An excellent question. Humanity helped because they valued different things than the council. They valued relationships over transactions. They valued compassion over calculation. They believed, perhaps naively, that the galaxy was a community rather than a marketplace. And they were wrong, a Zentari student said bitterly. The galaxy is a marketplace. Were they wrong? Deho challenged. Humanity survived and prospered without the Council. They built a civilization based on mutual support and shared sacrifice. Meanwhile, the Council fractured because no one was willing to make sacrifices for anyone else. Which approach was more successful? The question hung in the air. These young people had grown up in a galaxy of regional conflicts, trade wars, and instability. They had heard stories from their grandparents about the old days when the Council kept peace and facilitated cooperation. But they had never experienced it themselves. A Talaxian student spoke up. My grandmother is Mira Kwan. She says the biggest mistake was not offering to help humanity cure the Crimson Fade. That if the Council had sent medical teams instead of closing gates, everything would be different. Your grandmother is a wise woman, Deho said. She was one of only 3 who voted against the quarantine. But even she could not prevent what happened next. He brought up economic data from the decades following the quarantine. The species that voted for isolation thought they would benefit. The Zentari planned to steal human technology. The Aquarians seized human worlds. Everyone expected to profit from humanity's weakness. The data showed the opposite. Economic growth stagnated. Innovation slowed. Cultural production became derivative. The very things the Council had hoped to gain by excluding humanity disappeared in their absence. This is the paradox, Deho explained. The Council needed humanity more than humanity needed the Council. But they did not realize it until too late. By the time they understood their mistake, humanity had learned to live without them. Another student asked the question Deho had been expecting. Can it ever be fixed? Will humanity ever rejoin the galactic community? Deho considered his answer carefully. Define rejoin. Humanity trades with us. They share culture with us. They provide aid during disasters. They maintain diplomatic relations with individual species. What they will not do is subordinate their sovereignty to a collective body. Because they do not trust us, the lithoid student said. Because trust once broken is nearly impossible to rebuild, Deho corrected gently. Imagine you had a close friend who abandoned you during your darkest hour. Years later, after you had overcome your crisis alone, that friend returned and asked to be close again. Would you trust them the same way? The students shook their heads. They understood. Trust was not a light switch that could be flipped back on. It was a plant that grew slowly and could be killed in an instant. So we live with the consequences, a Nexarian student said. Our grandparents made a choice and we pay for it. Yes, Deho agreed. But you also benefit from it. The lesson humanity taught us was painful but necessary. You now live in a galaxy where species know that unity requires sacrifice, that trust must be earned, and that short-term gain can lead to long-term loss. He brought up a final image. The monument in Geneva, visible from orbit, the names of 2.3 billion dead scrolling endlessly across its surface. The inscription, "We stood alone. We survived. We remember." This is humanity's memorial to the quarantine, Deho said. Notice what it does not say. It does not call for revenge. It does not curse the Council. It does not demand apologies. It simply states facts. They stood alone. They survived. They remember. Is that enough? A student asked. Just remembering? For humanity, yes, Deho said. They learned their lesson and moved forward. The question is whether we have learned ours. The lecture ended, but students lingered to ask more questions. They wanted to understand how to avoid repeating their predecessors' mistakes. They wanted to know if the fracture could ever be healed. They wanted hope that the galaxy could be better than it was. Deho answered as honestly as he could. Some mistakes could not be undone. Some relationships could not be restored. But each generation had the opportunity to make different choices, to value different things, to build different systems. As the students filed out, one young human remained behind. She was an exchange student from Earth, studying galactic history. Her name was June Park, and she was the great-great-granddaughter of Taman Park, the ambassador who had delivered humanity's final message before the gates closed. Mr. Choi, she said, my family has told stories about the quarantine for generations, but they never speak with anger. Why do you think that is? Deho smiled. Because anger is a burden and humanity had enough burdens to carry. They chose to put down the one burden they could control. But they did not forget, June said. No, Deho agreed. They did not forget. Forgiveness and forgetting are not the same thing. Humanity forgave the galaxy for what it did, but they remember so they never make the same mistake of trusting blindly again. June nodded slowly. I am supposed to give a presentation to my class back on Earth about my time here. What should I tell them about the current state of galactic civilization? Tell them the truth, Deho said. Tell them that the galaxy is learning slowly and painfully to value the things humanity always valued. Tell them that the fracture caused suffering, but also forced necessary growth. And tell them that many species now understand what was lost even if it cannot be recovered. As June left, Deho remained in the empty room, surrounded by the ghosts of past decisions. He thought about the cost of those decisions, measured in broken trust and fractured unity. He thought about the lessons learned and the ones still being processed, and he hoped that future generations, both human and alien, would choose more wisely than their ancestors had. 50 years after Deho Choi's lecture, the transformation of the galaxy was complete. The old Galactic Council building on Centauri Prime had been converted into a museum. Tourists from dozens of species walked through halls that once held power, reading plaques that explained how unity had crumbled. The galaxy now operated through a complex network of regional federations, bilateral agreements and trade alliances. It was messier than the old system, more chaotic but also more honest. Species helped each other because they chose to, not because a council voted to require it. Trust was earned through consistent action, rather than assumed through institutional membership. Humanity had expanded to 47 star systems. The United Human Territories had become one of the galaxy's major powers, but a power unlike any that had existed before. They had no interest in conquest or dominance. Instead, they focused on internal development, cultural growth, and selective cooperation with species that shared their values. Chancellor Yuna Han stood in her office overlooking the city of New Sol on the planet Terra Nova. The city stretched to the horizon, a blend of Earth architecture and innovations developed during the long isolation. Parks and green spaces broke up the urban landscape, a deliberate choice that reflected humanity's commitment to balance. Her assistant entered with a data tablet. Chancellor, we have requests from 3 different species asking for humanitarian assistance. The lithoids are experiencing food shortages due to crop failures. The Binari have a medical crisis in their outer colonies, and the Aquarians are dealing with the aftermath of a massive storm on their homeworld. Yuna reviewed the requests. Send agricultural specialists to the lithoids. Dispatch medical teams to the Binari colonies, and coordinate with our engineering corps for the Aquarian reconstruction. Standard protocols for all 3. The lithoids are offering payment in rare minerals, her assistant noted. Refuse it, Yuna said firmly. When we provide humanitarian aid, we do not charge. That is not who we are. This was the human way now. They helped not because of treaties or obligations, but because they could and because it aligned with their values. They had learned during the quarantine that survival meant developing self-sufficiency, but they had also maintained their fundamental belief that helping others was worthwhile for its own sake. The difference was that now they helped on their own terms. No species could vote to force humanity into action. No council could demand their resources or their sacrifice. When humans helped, it was a gift freely given, which made it more valuable than any obligation. In the museum on Centauri Prime, young June Park led a tour group through the halls. She had become a historian like Deho Choi, dedicating her life to preserving the lessons of the quarantine. Now in her 40s, she specialized in teaching non-humans about human perspectives. This is the chamber where the vote took place, June explained to her group, which included visitors from a dozen different species. 44 species voted to isolate humanity. 3 voted against it. The decision took less than an hour. A young Zentauri in the group raised his hand. My grandfather says that vote destroyed the Zentarii Empire, that we never recovered from the economic collapse that followed. Your grandfather is correct, June said, but the collapse was not punishment. It was consequence. The Zentarii economy depended heavily on technology they did not fully understand. When humanity was cut off, that knowledge gap became critical. She moved the group to the next exhibit, which showed the spread of human colonies during the isolation period. While the council fractured, humanity expanded. Not aggressively, but deliberately. They chose systems carefully, developed them sustainably, and built infrastructure that would last. Why did they not seek revenge? An Aquarian student asked. After what was done to them, why did they not strike back when they had the capability? June smiled. It was a question she heard often. Because revenge would have made them into what the Council feared they might become. Humanity chose a different path. They chose to prove that the galaxy was wrong about them. The group moved through more exhibits, each one documenting a different aspect of the quarantine and its aftermath, the Crimson Fade and its cure, the economic impacts on both human and non-human worlds, the fracture of the Council, the emergence of the new galactic order. At the final exhibit, June paused before a holographic display showing the current state of galactic civilization. Regional federations in green, independent powers in blue, and humanity in gold. The gold territories were smaller than some of the great federations, but they connected to dozens of other systems through trade routes and cultural exchanges. This is where we are now, June said. Not united under one government, but connected through choice and mutual respect. It is not the dream the Council had, but it might be more sustainable. Do you think humanity will ever fully rejoin the galactic community? A Talaxian visitor asked. We never left, June said simply. We are part of the community. We trade, we exchange culture, we cooperate on scientific research. We just do not submit to external political control. And honestly, few species do anymore. That particular dream died with the Council. After the tour, June sat in the museum cafeteria with a cup of coffee, reviewing her notes for the next presentation. An elderly Nexarian approached her table. Historian Park, I am Suji Bay. I once served on the Council. June recognized the name. Suji had been one of the voices calling for reconciliation after the truth about the quarantine emerged. She stood and offered a respectful bow. Counselor Bay, it is an honor. Please join me. Suji sat down slowly, her age evident in her movements. I wanted to tell you that your great-great-grandfather's final speech haunts me still. We will remember who stood with us and who turned away. He was right. He was speaking from pain, June said gently. He watched millions die while the galaxy debated protocols. That kind of trauma leaves marks. And yet humanity forgave us, Suji said. Why? June considered the question. It was one she had asked her own family many times. I think because holding on to anger would have harmed us more than it harmed you. Forgiveness was not a gift to the galaxy. It was a gift we gave ourselves. But you did not forget, Suji noted. No, June agreed. We built a monument that will stand for thousands of years. Every human child learns about the quarantine in school. It is part of our collective memory now, but memory without anger is just wisdom. Suji smiled sadly. I wish the Council had learned that wisdom earlier. Perhaps things would be different. Perhaps, June said. Or perhaps we needed to learn our lessons the hard way. Humanity learned that we could survive alone. The galaxy learned that unity requires genuine commitment, painful lessons but necessary ones. On Earth, in the city of Geneva, the monument still stood. Millions of visitors came each year to see it, to read the names, to understand what had happened. The inscription remained simple and powerful. We stood alone. We survived. We remember. But around the monument, life continued. Children played in the parks. Artists created new works. Scientists made discoveries. Humanity had not been defined by its trauma. It had been tempered by it, made stronger and more resilient but not consumed by it. Chancellor Yuna Han addressed the Territorial Assembly, outlining her vision for the next 50 years. Continued expansion but at a sustainable pace. Increased cultural exchanges with species that approached honestly. Investment in education, arts, and scientific research. Maintenance of strong defenses not for conquest but for security. And above all, commitment to the principles of sovereign cooperation that had guided humanity since the quarantine. We will never again place our fate in the hands of others, Yuna said. But we will also never close ourselves off from the galaxy. We will engage, cooperate, and build relationships. We will help those in need and accept help when it is offered honestly. We will be part of the galactic community, while remaining masters of our own destiny. The Assembly approved her vision unanimously. This was the human way now, forged in the fires of abandonment and tempered by decades of independence. They were not isolationists. They were not empire builders. They were simply themselves, confident in their values and unwilling to compromise their sovereignty. 300 years after the quarantine began, historians would look back and see it as a turning point. The moment when forced unity gave way to voluntary cooperation. The moment when the galaxy learned that relationships built on fear and obligation could not survive crisis. The moment when humanity chose to move forward rather than look back in anger. In classrooms across 100 worlds, students would study the quarantine and debate its lessons. What could have been done differently? What should have been done? How could trust be built in a galaxy of competing interests? And on Earth, in Geneva, the monument would stand. A reminder of pain survived, of lessons learned, of the price of betrayal and the strength found in isolation. Not a call for revenge, but a statement of fact. Humanity had stood alone, humanity had survived, and humanity would always remember. The galaxy had changed because of that memory, not through conquest or force, but through the quiet dignity of a species that refused to be defined by others' failures. They had been abandoned, but they had not broken. They had been isolated, but they had not withered. They had been betrayed, but they had not become bitter. Instead, they had become exactly what they always were: human. Flawed but resilient, hurt but healing, remembering but not consumed by the past. And in that transformation, they had taught the galaxy a lesson more valuable than any technology or resource. That true strength comes not from never falling, but from rising again. Not from never being hurt, but from choosing how to respond to that hurt. Not from forgetting the past, but from refusing to let it control the future. The Galactic Council had collapsed under the weight of its guilt. But from that collapse, something new had emerged. Not perfect, not unified, but honest. A galaxy where species chose to cooperate because they wanted to, not because they were forced to. Where relationships were built on demonstrated values rather than institutional mandates. Where humanity, once abandoned, now stood as an example of what could be achieved through independence and integrity. It was not the dream the original council had held, but it was perhaps a better one. More realistic, more sustainable, and built on the hard-won wisdom that comes from surviving your darkest hour and choosing to move forward with grace. The silence humanity had chosen was not punishment. It was peace. And in that peace, both humanity and the galaxy had found a new way forward.